It's rough to realize your kid knows how fragile you are.
Paul, do not do that. How are you so strong?
Well, congratulations on season 2. And I'm going to dive right into how we left things in season 1 with, I guess, the cliffhanger or push over the cliff, as we like to say, like that whole moment. I'd love for you to tell us how long you knew that that's the way that you wanted to lead into season 2. And how do you think that's going to affect Jimmy going forward?
Well, we wanted to be really honest in season 1 about that if you're practicing therapy in an unconventional way, that there were going to be consequences. Like Jimmy is definitely drawing outside of the lines. And so it would have been dishonest to have it all work out great. And so we needed to pick up season 2, kind of dealing with the repercussions of somebody trying to figure out a new approach. I think we do it in a really, really fun way. And yeah, it sort of leads us in, launches us into this season about figuring out forgiveness.
Yeah, when we talked to Bill, he talked about how that was the sort of big theme for this season, as grief was the one for the first one. For you, this is such a huge lift because it's a show that you are creating, writing, executive producing, and starring in. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of sort of balancing all 4 of those together?
I got to be honest with you. I have such an easy gig given that I'm doing all that stuff, because Bill, Brett, Neil, our showrunner, do so much of the heavy lifting. My job is really to be honest and present on set and on screen. And I guess to some extent, I'm a quarterback on set, but I'm by no means juggling those jobs on my own. I was very lucky to be brought into this group.
Well, I think you can't watch this show and not think about the therapy that you take in your life, but more importantly, the therapy that like the characters aren't taking for themselves. I think your character is a perfect example of that. But if you could give your character a bit of therapy and a little bit of advice for season 2, what would it be?
I think the big lesson that Jimmy's going to face this season is it's not going to be outside achievement that's going to ultimately solve his problem. Something's not right with Jimmy. We sort of have that sense, and it's going to play out throughout the season. But I think a lot of us try to handle these feelings by going out and being high achievers or having successes at work or through our children. And you can't run from the thing. You can't run from the dirty underneath, what's actually causing the problem.
Last question, and this is a very serious one. Which Muppet needs the most therapy?
I mean, Animal's a rage machine, man. Seriously, he really does. We actually wrote that into my Muppet movie, but yeah, I would say Animal. There's a bunch of them in there who could use a little bit of reflection, though.
Whoa, what are you wearing your sex boxes at work for, you little freak?
Dress for the job you want.
Wow, you better slow that down.
I definitely want to talk about season 2 because I don't know if this is like an added thing to go into it, but just knowing the decisions that Gabby made last season, were you feeling like when her and Jimmy hooked up, like, I just don't know if this is right for your journey? Because I feel like that was a moment. Like, it's like,
yeah.
Right now, is this where we're going?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think in general, if you see me casted and there's another guy in the cast that's a little bit taller than me, you can just assume that it ran through executives and casting directors of, I'm probably going to have to like smooch them usually on camera. That's like the thing. And that was always the plan for Gabby and Jimmy without knowing how it was going to shake out. But for me, I love seeing stories don't exist without mistakes and like imperfect people. And so the kind of stories I'm interested in telling, the kind of stories I'm interested in watching is seeing stuff that like can either be good or bad. It's more so just watching like conflicts arise and the tension that comes in. And that's where story is. So yeah, it was one of those things where, as an actor, it's not really our job to judge. We just kind of honor their choices and we honor who they are in the moment. But that was definitely one of those where it was like, girl, okay, you tripping, you grieving and you tripping.
Divorced, heartbroken, and this
best friends, dude. Like it's pretty bananas. But I do actually think in grief that actually happens quite a bit. between the spouse and the best friend. I think that actually happens more often than we talk about. So I really liked it. I thought it like really made sense for the show and for grieving.
Watching this show, I think you're always struck by the fact that the characters all need a lot of therapy that maybe they're not getting. And then you're also struck by the idea of like what Jimmy is doing. Like if you were giving them this radical therapy, what you would want to say to them. And maybe not that bluntly, but do you have what you want to give like therapy advice to your character? What advice would you be giving them?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I think she just needs to go through it. Like sometimes with therapy, we're obsessed with like this idea of perfection and of being not toxic and of being, not toxic and all these things. But we all actually sometimes are the red flags. Sometimes we are the flag. Sometimes we wave the flag and then we put it away and then we bring it back. Like we all go through our own journeys. So you never know what's in someone's head. So I actually don't really have any advice for her. I think she's doing just fine. She's like a Black woman in America in this economy. Like it's like just fine.
Everything is right with your journey. Well, one thing we can definitely talk about is the lovely friendship between you and Liz that is budding throughout in season 2. And it was funny because when we spoke to her, she was saying that.
What did she say? What did she say?
It was a reflection of real life.
Oh, that's nice.
Like, as you all got to know each other better, that sort of was also reflected in the writing and sort of getting to know each other. You got to explore that as also kind of your characters. Like at first feeling each other out and not knowing to like really being like, oh no, like this is exactly who I need to be hanging out with.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something really fun about just sort of opposites finding each other. And I think especially in this world with Gabby and Liz, like Gabby lost her absolute best friend. And so there is definitely a little bit of a hole. And I do love that they go from having tension to just kind of being really tight. And there's such great stuff between Gabby and Liz this season. I feel like they really show up for each other. And I'm really excited to for everybody to explore all the really fun bits that Christa and I got to do playing those parts. Because there's some really solid And Bill Lawrence, who is her husband and who is the creator and showrunner, of our show, he is obsessed with seeing us together. Like sometimes, even if we weren't shooting, me and Chris would be talking and you could see Bill in the corner just laughing, being like, I just love seeing you guys together, So it's like, there was joy in making it. And I really hope that it comes through, in this season.
That brings me to, you talk about this season. Last season, seeing that sort of blossom was one of the things we loved. But the best moment and the one that everybody sort of talked about was you at the art show and just the rage of that.
Yeah.
When did you know that was happening? What was it like? Because that's also a bit of wish fulfillment too, as an actor, where you can just go there.
It's so funny because we did a lot of the press before that episode came out. I think that episode's episode 8 and it's late in the season, but Zach Braff directed that episode. And so a lot of that episode, especially that scene, was I kind of barely remember. I just remember feeling so comfortable on set and knowing that it was good with Zach. It was great with Bill. Bill always is please just go for it. As long as we get the lines written first, Bill's into just kind of playing. And so I think somebody there's now just this myth about who started improvising. He likes thumbs in the butt. To me, Zach told me that, and somebody a writer told me that, and I didn't make that up that he was into thumbs in the butt, but they say that actually that came from my brain, which I don't really remember. So it's sort of a who came, a chicken or the egg situation about all the thumbs in the butt stuff. But yeah, I honestly don't really know, but I think that that's a really nice sort of representation of the show is we're really collaborative and all in this together, and the best joke wins, and kind of no ego. And it's it's a really great job for me to have. I get to really flex my muscles.
It mentioned you flexing because she said
what the hell? What did she say? What did she say?
I love how you're what did she say?
What? I'm just kidding.
She said that you have her cracking up with that's exactly where you are. So I'm curious, what was your favorite improv line? What was your favorite one that you just sort of put out there that nobody knew?
My favorite, I'm so happy they said that. My favorite, there's a scene where from last season where Gabby goes to pick up Paul, and she walks in, and his lady Julie is there, and Gabby is like completely shocked. There's a lot of little stuff that I improvised of like just little dancing and just little moments in that scene that I'm just so proud of and that get to exist on the timeline of Harrison Ford's career, this little scene that I got to be a part of. But that's kind of maybe one of my favorite things. There's just so much improvising in there, and it was so well written. Like there's actually not that many added lines, but just sort of the dancing and the walking behind the wall and just stuff like that is like, it was just, that's maybe my favorite still so far that I've done. And then I got to do a lot of really great stuff with Damon Wayans Jr. this season that we're just pretty wild together. So I'm really excited for everybody to see that too.
That's it?
You want me to pull my pants down and make my ass clap?
How much do you pay him?
Nothing.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I just wanted to start with, again, just returning to this world. I mean, it seems like nothing to be said, but this is a type of character that we've seen you play, and now seeing you sort of do it in this new world. What was it sort of like coming back into, I don't know, the Lawrence verse, as it were?
It's actually, we have so many cool writers on our show that have very unique styles. And I feel like this character, especially this season, is way different for me. It's like they just leaned into something last year and leaned into it more this season, and it was different. I mean, the Lawrence universe is a universe that everyone's lovely at work. Everyone's respectful. It's like it's magical to be on a Doozer show. So that's more what I take from, Lawrence universe. He'll love that. My husband will love that you said that.
I know it's not like it's a far casting call, but I do love that they keep bringing you back. The other thing I will say too is with Liz is her dynamic with Sean this season is so great. Most particularly the two of them going into business together with the food truck. I'd love for you to talk about how much fun that was and what's that sort of shaping up for season 2.
I love Sean, but it's not Sean. It's Luke. Luke Tennie is a pleasure to work with. We have so much fun. I mean, look, everyone in the cast, just everyone shows up. It's like everyone knows their material. It's A-team all the way. And working with Luke on the food truck, we had too much fun because we would be on location and it would just be us. We couldn't go back to our trailers. And then we're trouble together, kind of.
Your character's trouble in general, just because, again, it's like... In general, yeah. Like, just very blunt, tells it like it is. There's no mincing words with it. And let's also say, your husband gives you, like, all of the best one-liners. Like, he really does give you... Do you have a favorite one of hers from either season 1 or season 2?
Oh, my God. I don't know. Bill... Because the problem is, I tend to say it like it is at home, and then Bill will steal that and put it on the show.
So they're really your lines.
Well, not all of them. Not all of them. That show is written, and I don't write it, and I don't improv. I mean, barely. So, but he has stolen a few things. I was just one of the things I remember from Scrubs is he had said to me, you don't see that person anymore? Do you hate them? And I said, no, I don't hate them. I nothing them. And then he put it on Scrubs. That's one I can think of.
I do remember that one.
Yeah.
I nothing. That's a great one. Between Jimmy, Gabby, and Paul, for yourself, because I think everybody starts to think about therapy watching a show like this. Who would you pick for your therapist? Although this is such a loaded question because the swings and valleys with the three of them are a lot. Between Jimmy, Gabby, and Paul, who would you pick?
I would pick Jimmy because I see Phil Stutz and he is like, stop doing that. That's not working for you. And here are the tools how to not do that. So I would probably be attracted to a Jimmy type person. Although all three of them are fantastic. I mean, Gabby, I would just want to be her friend and shoot the shit all day.
Well, that's very true. I mean, that's where your characters are in this season, is like they're sort of like deepening their friendship. And I think that's also one that was interesting too, about seeing that sort of dynamic on the show, which is not one that we got to explore so much in season 1. So I'd love for you to preview a little bit about what Gabby and Liz are going to get up to this season.
Firstly, also, it's kind of a real thing. You start them last season, they knew each other, they were acquaintances and starting to be friends, and you see that. And then Jessica and I started to be friends. And then you come into this season and you see, mistakes that you might make with a friend, or a misstep where you said the truth too much and someone didn't like it. And you see that, with our relationship this season, and we are better friends, and we're, it's also hard. I feel like, it's hard to make new friends. And we've made new friends, and I think you see it more this season.
Another big theme for the show is this idea, like I said, that all the characters sort of need a little bit of therapy. And since this is somebody that you've now gotten to get to know over 2 seasons playing her, what would be the therapy that you would give to Liz as like your sort of advice to her?
Oh my God. I was just listening to that U2 song, You Gotta Get Out of Your Own Way. I think I would tell her that she needs to find something that really that she's passionate about. It is, and I know that's difficult. It's impossible. It's hard as an actor when you're not working to, do things creatively that you feel passionate about in between jobs. But if you're not a creative person, it's just hard. But you have to find something. I think your world should get bigger as you get older.
That's such good advice. I think I'd be a little bit remiss if I didn't talk about one of the best scenes that like most folks talked about. And that was you and Derek telling off the neighbor. Like you and Ted McGinty with that scene was just, I don't know, hilarious, ridiculous. I'd love for you to just set up that day. How did you keep a straight face? That's what I like. That seems like a moment that's just built for breaking.
Oh, with Ted McGinley, I'm sure that scene, because we were all in it, and every time he drove by, I'm sure that was so many takes. I know that's in our gag reel. No one could keep a straight face. Also because Ted would just so cheerfully say it.
You're not gonna start jimmying me.
Sorry, jimmying you?
You know, that weird therapy you do outside of the office that Paul hates.
Jimmying though, huh?
Dear God.
I really want to just dive right into, I think the closest we're going to get to an action sequence in this show, and that's with you and Jason in the MMA ring. That is just such a departure for what you would expect on a therapist comedy. So talk a little bit about when you guys found out that was happening and what's that like to shoot?
So I agree. I have played something with some action component in every job of my career. And Shrinking, the Apple TV Plus comedy made by the people who made Ted Lasso, is where I've done the most. It's such a surprise, but man, am I grateful. Oh, that sequence, I just kept hoping I would get back in the ring, because in season 1, I got to get beat up the whole time. And then Sean had one fight where he won, which was cool. To me, getting beat up is fun because I get to sell all the reactions, my favorite thing. But this scene right here, man, I remember telling my wife, and I looked at her, I was like, they are doing the most this season, and I'm here for it. And I can tell you that what you saw in the end result is one variant of about, we did like, 6 totally different ways. It was so much fun to shoot. And Jason is extremely physical. So he knows exactly what to do to sell, what needs to be sold. It was as fun as you could imagine. That's how I'll put it to you. It was like showing up to work and they're like, hey, surprise, we're going to Disneyland.
Do y'all ever like fake it out on set, like break out a sequence from the sparring match, just like at craft services? Be like, let's just like,
no, they're all such warm people. So no, we're never even fighting in jest. We just hug each other a lot.
Oh, wow. The feels.
Yeah,
well,
it's pretty nice.
That's what this show's about. Can you preview a little bit about what is going to happen in their other aspect, the main aspect, this therapist-patient relationship? How is that going to evolve in season 2?
So I think it's going to reflect reality in a specific way. Most times we see therapy on television and film. It's an aspect of what we're watching. For Shrinking, it's the show. It's what the show is about. So obviously we get to delve in and experience more of what the process is. And the process is not the product. The process is ugly and it's frustrating and it doesn't always go the direction you want it to. And in Sean's case in particular, you can see that there are successes that he thought were wins, where there would be no turning back. But he's learning now that some of the things that he thought were wins were actually issues. And that's a very frustrating thing to learn. But when you learn it, you have the power to change it.
Oh, that's powerful. I mean, I think that's probably the answer to this next question, but I don't know, maybe you can expand. I've been asking everyone, because every character obviously in the show needs therapy. What therapy would you give your character? Like, what would you tell them if you were their therapist? I think that might be like it, but if there's anything you want to expand.
I would agree with you. I think when you can name the thing, then you understand that there's an issue. Oftentimes, we're always reminded that the first step is admitting that there's a problem. And in Sean's case, you know, it needs to be said to him. It needs to be addressed by Jimmy and Paul. But I think his acceptance of it is equally as valuable as him naming it.
On a lighter note, Sean and Liz go into the food truck business. And that, I know anytime you go into business with people, that's going to bring in new dynamics to the friendship. What can you tell folks that's going to be like, this whole enterprise they're going on together?
Honestly, I think every time we see the truck, there's a feeling of hope. This person came into the office in season 1 ready to punch a hole in the wall. And now he's serving people food and loves it. So I think Sean's arc is an example of what can happen when a community steps in to help someone. And that someone is receptive to that help.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And I think one of the things that we sort of discover is with Sean is as we meet people that are in his life, like his dad, it not explains, but it gives you a lot of clues into why.
It's context, right?
Yeah,
it'll clue you in on what's exactly going on.
Are we going to get more of that father-son sort of exploration in season 2? And what's that going to be like for Sean as he is trying to sort of like level up in some of these things?
Yes, we are. Sean, a lot of his issues don't necessarily just stem from what happened in Afghanistan. It was coming home. And at home, there's family. So we will get to explore what goes on with Sean and his family and what that dynamic is. How well it goes, we have to wait and see.
How well it goes. Ooh, since we didn't get to talk to you after season 1 and we can kind of look back on it in retrospect, do you have a particular day that you really enjoyed filming? A lot of people have talked about the wedding day scene, but I'll let you decide if there's another moment.
For me, day 1. I remember the first day like the back of my hand. I had the script for about 2.5 months. So if you were to wake me up at 2:16 a.m. with a flashlight saying recite scene 4 from episode 1, blah, 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 I just knew it. And day 1, I got to set and it was all action. Everything that we did for Sean's montage sequence, getting beat up and the MMA stuff, we did that all on day 1. And then we ended it with the first time we see Jimmy being that psychological vigilante, where he has a session with Sean at the MMA gym while they're drinking slushies. So for me, I got to know Jason very well as an actor. I got to do a bunch of action stuff, so I'm living my dream. But all in all, the tone of the show was set for me. I felt like it was very clear what my job was as Sean and as a performer in this series. And I just felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. And then the rest of the week, I got to go and meet the rest of the cast and continue performing with other people in other scenes. But day 1, yeah, that day changed my life as a performer. And I'm very grateful.
You okay? You have a bad dream?
That's how I clear my throat. Ah! There we go.
I really wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the father and daughter dynamic that you have between Alice and Jimmy going into season 2. I'm curious if you could preview a little bit what we have in store, especially between, you and Jason too, since I think you'll be acting more together this season.
At the beginning of season 2, we see Alice worried about Jimmy after the fallout and chaos of season 1 with his patient Grace. I think she's definitely noticing that he could potentially be spiraling maybe back into old bad habits, and she's wanting to make sure that he doesn't do that. So she's a little concerned about Dad at the top of the season. But yeah, we've got lots of good juicy scenes in season 2 as well.
I think too, a lot of people remarked in season 1 about your fights and just how epic they could be. What's it like filming those? And I'm guessing, based on what you're saying, there's probably going to be maybe a few more this season 2.
Yeah, I mean, in shooting both seasons, shooting fights with Jason, it goes back and forth. Sometimes they're more comedic fights and sometimes they're more dramatic fights. And on the comedic fights, I'm really just trying not to break and laugh because he's the funniest ever. And I just have to be a cold teenager and storm off and be aloof. And then in the juicier stuff, it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes. Jason is such a good actor and is so dropped in and present. And I just only want to match that when I'm working with him. So then when we have our more serious, I guess, fights, yeah, we always check in at the end and give each other a big hug.
Oh, that's nice. I like little love at the end of it. It seems like it's just a byproduct of this show that you start thinking about giving your character a little bit of therapy, because every character in this show needs therapy. If you could give character any therapeutic advice, what would you give them?
If I could give Alice therapeutic advice, I would tell her to just keep making mistakes and learning herself. She's still young and still going through it. And I think that she obviously needs to be strong and feels a responsibility to be an anchor to a lot of people around her, especially Jimmy. Mm-hmm. But I'd tell her to take a chill pill and just calm down for a second. It's okay to fuck up. It's okay to make your mistakes and learn from them. And that's how we grow. So
everyone talked about the bench scenes last year between you and Harrison and just how hysterical that is. I'm curious though, for you, who do you think is actually helping who in this pairing? Because I think it's a fair question. Who's the therapist and who's the client? Don't you think?
I'm so flattered that could be contested, that Alice is giving Harrison Ford advice, giving Paul advice.
Maybe not advice, but who needs that moment more? You know what I mean? I don't know.
It's mutually beneficial. We love sharing snacks on a bench together. Alice is a great vibe for Paul, I'm sure.
I definitely wanted to ask you a little bit about the freedom that Bill sort of sets on his sets, because I know the script is there and it's dialed in. You guys know the beats that you're going to have, but I know because he's so particular about casting, he wants to give that freedom to where if you feel a moment that you can say something that feels within the character and really sort of ride that. Do you have a favorite moment from season 1 that was like that? Where maybe it wasn't necessarily on the page, but it just became something very different when you either did it at the table read or when you shot it?
I think those moments for me specifically with Alice were maybe nonverbal. I think that there were certain looks on those park bench scenes with Paul, or glares that I would give Jimmy, or not one in particular, but I think I was giving a lot of nonverbal communication and science.
Okay. Serving face, we will take that. That is still outside. Did you get to witness one that you were on the receiving end of, where you just had to go with it? Okay, so do you have a memorable one of those?
I'm thinking about Jessica. There was a scene with us. I don't even remember what episode it is in season 1, but we were talking about boys and talking about having sex, and she was going off, and it's just hard not to break when she's the funniest person in the world.
Push my husband off a cliff. I'm a psycho with good hair.
I like the good hair part.
Look whose self-esteem is back.
I really wanted to chat with you, sort of recapping a little bit about season 1, because I think this is a show people sort of discovered in that time between now and season 2. But we didn't get to talk about your wedding last time because folks didn't know it was happening. So I'd love for you to recount a little bit. What was that like filming it? Because it was such a chaotic thing leading up to it. And then it was such a sweet moment.
Oh, yeah. It was a great day. I never did a wedding before on TV or in a movie, so it was really lovely. I've not had a wedding in my real life, so it was kind of fun to like live out that. It was beautifully shot. It was when you're filming anything with a lot of people, it takes longer because you got to turn the camera to all of them. But it was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful setting. And it was special because we all got to be together. So the whole cast was there. I think almost everybody was in that scene. So it was a fun hang day. It was a fun day to all of us get to hang out. But I would say I had 2 big takeaways. One is that Harrison Ford cried. And so even though it was pretend, I can say that Harrison Ford cried at my wedding. And the other is Jason had basically all the lines that day at the wedding, and specifically the ceremony, because he was the officiant. And he did such an incredible job. He delivered it so beautifully, and he delivered it that beautifully every time. So he had to do it dozens of times. And even if it was for the background actors' coverage, so the actors that were sitting, that were pretending to be my friends, they sat there all day and the camera was just panning across them. Jason gave them the same amount of energy and emotion that he gave me, that he gave Harrison and Christa and Jessica. He gave all of us, and the same amount that he gave when it was on him, when the camera was on him. And that was one of those days I was like, well, this is why this guy is the star of the show. Because he is, yes, consummate professional. Yes, brilliant actor. But a generous leader. And he gave everybody the same performance.
Oh, I love that. That is so sweet. Also, yeah, I would own that bar about Harrison Ford crying at my wedding. I would not be like, no, this is not a technicality. That happened. I was there. There's video. We will have to accept it. That sets up an interesting dynamic for season 2, which is that this is married life for you. So what is going to be sort of different as far, for Brian in season 2, now knowing, that, this is a whole new dynamic.
Right. So I think Brian loves Brian, and Brian also loves Charlie. And I think that now that Brian and Charlie are, kind of linked, it brings up a lot of new things for him. And specifically, Charlie starts thinking about fatherhood. And I think Brian has always thought about being a father in the abstract. And I can kind of relate to this because, as queer people in our 40s, we don't grow up thinking about, we didn't grow up thinking about marriage, really. We didn't grow up thinking about parenting, really, because it was so complicated. Or if we did, it was, and I think that Brian, like me, is someone who didn't have in him an inherent gene that said, you must get married, you must be a father. I think everyone thinks about it, everyone considers it. But I think Charlie was born to be a dad, born to be a husband, and Brian is sort of along for the ride at first, and panics because it's anything. Brian panics at anything, and here comes babyhood, fatherhood, and it scares him, and it becomes the first and biggest wrench in Brian and Charlie's new life together.
Oh, that's a nice. Oh, you previewed that very well. See, this gentleman's been on TV for a while, folks. He knows how to do it. Interesting that you mentioned Jason, because Brian and Jimmy, they're best friends, and that is obviously such a great dynamic. But I was surprised to read that you were a little bit, I don't know, intimidated, like jumping on set with Jason. So how did you get past that to where now I think in season 1, obviously your characters are very close, but I think it's listening to you talk about him here, y'all have also gotten very close. And then also the Harrison Ford of it all. We can't leave that out as well. I mean, I would be intimidated knowing he was going to be on my set every day.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of heavies on this show, you know. I mean, and season 2 was no different. I had some pretty real imposter syndrome when we did season 1. I've been in the business a while now, and it's rare that I walk into a job where I don't know someone. You know, I haven't worked with someone before, or someone doesn't vouch for me. And this was a show where I knew one of the writers, and that was it. And I didn't know anyone else. I auditioned on tape, so I didn't meet anybody at the audition. I never did a chemistry read with Jason. I met him at the table read. And in the first episode of the first season, I didn't have any lines. You just see me across the street. So even the first day, I didn't say anything. I mean, I said hello and we met and everything, but like, I didn't know these people. And so there was a while where I was like, are they sure? Am I gonna show up and they're gonna say, that's not Andrew Rannells? You know, like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know how they worked. And my friend who was the writer, who I had worked with before, he was new too. I mean, he was on the writing staff, but he didn't know how it was gonna work. So it took a little while for me. I mean, everybody was cool. Everybody was nice. It wasn't like, but it was intimidating just because it was, not because of anything anybody was doing. I came around. I grew into it, and by the time we did season 2, I felt like it was going to be okay, and I wasn't worried about it. I think to answer your question about the family, this is a show about chosen family, and we are all very different. It's a group of people, and I think that this is. I think for a long time on TV, you saw shows that were about the same people, 6 of the same version of a person, and now TV is exploring what it's like for opposites to attract, and like what happens when this kind of a person becomes friends with this kind of person. And this is a show where you have a group of people who know each other. You know, some of them only know each other a little bit. Some of them have known each other forever. Some of them are related. Some of them are just neighbors. And they end up as a family. And you put any 2 of them together and something interesting happens. And we get to do that even more this season. I get more scenes with Tennie, who plays Sean. I get more scenes with Lukita Maxwell, who plays Alex, with Ted McGinley. So you're putting these characters together and seeing what happens. And it's pretty cool. I think in a way, it more resembles the real world than we used to on TV. And that's something I'm really excited about.
You might argue I don't have enough boundaries. Well, maybe you have too damn many. And we should be working together, like Batman and Robin. You can even be Batman.
I think a lot of folks watching this show just love watching y'all as a couple. What is sort of the way that y'all create that dynamic on set, and how much fun do you guys have cracking up at all the stuff y'all get into?
Well, one, so much fun cracking up at all the stuff we get into. I mean, there's so few people get to go to work and enjoy it and laugh all day long and day in and day out. And we look forward to going to the set. We look forward to working hard. And that's so unusual. Like, I love that. So when you get to go to work and laugh, it makes life wonderful. Working, I have to say, Christa is just such a technician. She has so many difficult things to play in every episode, and to play opposite her is just a dream. And she's so unique. Like everything she plays is just a little left of center of way you might think about it ahead of time or how you see it. And so I love that. It makes it, every time it's different. She's just really a great partner. And I think it resonates with people when they watch that relationship, because it's so honest and it's so real. And you realize that Derek loves her. and understands that she's quirky and she's difficult sometimes, he loves her. They respect each other. That they have a great understanding of that. And I think that that's what people get, is that sometimes it sounds like they're difficult with each other, or she's saying something that's mean to him. He doesn't take it that way. It's just honest and, yeah, I got you. And we like to say Derek is ride or die with her.
Yeah, I mean, you see that they're really a team in any situation, no matter how outlandish. They're like such a unit. And I think nothing better sort of like demonstrates that than the scene with y'all and the neighbor, and just how outlandish that scene really gets. I'd love for you to set up that day in particular, because we talked to her and she definitely said it. She was just like, you had to stay so dialed into that day because you knew that whatever was sort of happening around you was going to be just, you know what I mean? Like you had to stay with it because you knew otherwise you would break.
The great thing, and again, the genius in that writing is that everybody in the audience, everybody watching wanted to say that to her, right? And that his quip was so perfect without a beat. She told him what was going on, and without a beat, without question, he said, "Eat a dick, Pam." And and I get that 6 times a day from people. If I'm taking a run, 3 people will drive by and yell that out to me, you know. So I'm very proud of that, and I think a lot of women respect the fact that Derek respected his wife, listened to her, and stood up, and I think that that's what you see in this relationship.
That is also a thing about it too. It's right. It's the fact that he's like, I hate to say it, because pretty much everyone in the show needs a bit of therapy. Like they're all very
Yes.
damaged people. But Derek is actually fairly self-actualized. He's actually fairly like comfortable with his own self, knows his, what's that sort of portraying him? Because if I think back on it, he may be the most healed and like with it than anyone, which is saying something considering the audience of the show. I mean, the audience, the makeup of the cast.
The characters, yes. So I don't like to talk about it that much because I 100% agree with you. It's sort of Derek's secret that Derek is an understanding, self-evolved human being, and that he makes room for people who aren't perfect, including himself. And he understands that he makes mistakes, they make mistakes, but Derek is not a person who judges people on a day-to-day basis. And so I think I always like to say that Derek is light. And I think people really respond to that. I keep that in the back of my conscious all the time, that Derek is light in a room, and that's why people are attracted to him. And I do think here you are surrounded by chaos with all of these other characters, but Derek is there. And Derek, you'll see in season 2 that sometimes Derek will grab one of them and say, "Hey, it's going to be okay." And that's something. Why Derek? Why is that happening? And I think who knows? We'll see what happens.
Oh, that's funny you say that, because that's kind of my next question is there's a lot more of Derek in season 2. And so I was just curious what you were excited about that you got to do in season 2. I'm guessing maybe it is pulling these other characters together and be like, pull your socks up a bit.
Right. I mean, really what happens is Derek is now retired. So Derek has time for the first time to be involved in these other lives around him. And I think people are at first he was just Liz's husband, and now they're developing these relationships, and people are seeing value that Derek is a solid human being and a real man. And I think he's quirky. That's the fun part of Derek. He's very quirky, but I love it. And I love playing it. And I love that he's got this characteristic that is kind of knowing in a way. And it's fun to explore. I have no idea where it will go. But I will say in season 2, you see a lot more Derek, and nothing makes me happier than that.
This is also kind of an interesting one, because Derek seems like somebody that if anybody on the show was like, hey, you need to like go see a therapist, he'd be down for it. Where Liz seems the most not receptive to that, even in the slightest. So I'm just curious, for your character, Derek, if you had to pick between Jimmy, Paul, or Gabby, for him to sit down and do a little bit of therapy, more in the abstract than the reality, because obviously there's connections there. But if who would he get the most good results from seeking therapy with those three?
Well, right off the top of my head, I'd say Gabby. I mean, Gabby and Derek have this thing. They have this relationship. They kind of see each other through, and I guess it's kind of Gabby's thing, is that she's so clear. You can really see her. Paul is distant, but he's very succinct. So when he gives you something, it's spot on generally. And Jimmy is. I know Jimmy. I've seen his foibles. As a neighbor. So I suppose I just think that Derek and Gabby would. And we kind of get there. She's giving me some advice throughout the year, and he listens to her. So I think that would be it. I think Derek would be very comfortable with Gabby for sure.
We all hope that we're the kind of person who's gonna come through.
Something changed a few months ago. Felt like I got my dad back.
I have to ask this I know this might be a little bit like choosing between your children, but between
Bring it, I'm ready.
Shrinking, Ted Lasso, and Scrubs, I mean, they all really sort of live in this great place where you've kind of built this formula of being able to talk about difficult things in a comedic way. What would you say is sort of the secret formula to making these kinds of shows? And like, which one did you feel like you sort of perfected the recipe?
Oh, if I perfected the recipe, I would still not, there's a wake of disasters in my career. I just hide them from everybody. And luckily, a lot of them were so bad they weren't on TV. No, you know what is... to act like I'm some kind of pioneer would be disingenuous. I grew up, for me, responding directly to shows that were able to mix comedy and drama. And my mentor, Gary David Goldberg, created a show called Family Ties. It was hilarious, but they could still, turn and do an episode called like, Hey, My Name is Alex, won a bunch of Emmys, in which Mike Fox is dealing with the death of his best friend. It looked like Our Town. I used to love stuff like that. I told someone before that Scrubs was just Wonder Years and MASH smushed together, and then you sprinkle a little of The Simpsons on it, So I like the challenge for me writing-wise of doing a show that is comedy forward and funny, but that switches on a dime to moments of emotional depth. The challenge of it is if you're too silly, it's hard to make it dramatic and have anybody give a crap. And if you're too dramatic, it's hard for people to laugh if you've just shown them, the world's most darkest moment. I haven't perfected it, but I will say this. I think it's the actual human condition. I think we are all, at least all my friends and family, are laughing our way through some tough stuff, and you have to, it's like you got to smile or you're going to cry, right?
It's interesting because I think the comedy is just always baked in with these shows. I think it's what invites people in. But you said that the big theme for season 1 was grief. And then you've also said a little bit that this one is much more about forgiveness. I'd love for you to preview a little bit how you're going to explore that. And to your point, still keep it light as we delve into the side of it.
Sure. Look, one of my favorite things about Shrinking that I was never able to do on network TV was so fun, but it was a slog. You're like, oh my God, we have to do 26 episodes without immediately burying ourselves in the dirt and hiding forever, is you can drop little Easter eggs and breadcrumbs. So when I say the second year is about forgiveness, the people that have recently watched the show could probably sit here and tell me at least 5 topics they know are going to be explored because they've watched stories about a father that maybe didn't really come through for his daughter in a horribly dramatic time. They've seen Harrison Ford's character be kind of estranged, both from his daughter and also, as a guy that writes about mentorship a lot, not necessarily someone that was great at coming through for Gabby's character or Jessica Williams' character. It's pretty obvious that part of forgiveness is learning to forgive yourself. And if people watch the finale and the very last scene of the finale, I'm sure they know that there's somebody that will probably be struggling with that. So it's one of those words that I think if you're really going to move on past, a catastrophic tragedy in a huge dysfunctional family, you can't move on until you kind of hit that kind of forgiveness stage, and that's the only way you can ever move forward. But I think people can probably figure a lot of them out.
I mean, I think so too. It's funny that you say move forward, because right before you guys were getting ready to do press with this, anybody in my position would be remiss if they didn't ask you a little bit about the rumors about the Ted Lasso of it all, and whether you got to come back. Like, I know you're not probably going to tell me anything of substance, but I'm just curious, what were you doing when all of that sort of bandied about?
No, look, here's the thing I can tell you of substance, because it's the answer key for everyone, and it's not a cop-out. Jason Sudeikis is the captain of that ship creatively, and it's nothing that any of us lament. It's such a cool thing to know that you have the main voice and the lead, and he's so passionate. Nobody is unwillingly following his lead. We're all willingly following his lead. And that's why you're just never running into, like, a lot of the times stuff like this will slip out either one way or the other. But no one would ever do that, because we're all so kind of indebted and grateful to him. And it's, it's a big life decision for that guy. You know what I mean? So whoever, hears whatever's happening from that one way or the other, I guarantee you, and I would bet all my money on it, is going to hear it from Jason. That's just how it's going to work.
Since this is a show about therapy, and pretty much every character that y'all have written in this show is in need of more.
Yeah.
Who do you think is in the most need of therapy?
In this show, by the way, look, I'm shrinked up in real life. I think, I'm not like a therapy pusher that's trying to make other people go and stuff. But man, I've reached a stage that if somebody sat in front of me and said, I don't think talking out my problems is really helpful to me, I would probably be like, you sure? Because everybody that knows you thinks it might be helpful. But no, if you ask me, the character that needed it the most and is probably the most resistant to it is Liz. Definitely is out there looking for a sounding board, and finding them in the people in her life, which I guess is a compromise of sorts.
Wow. Thank you very much. That is interesting. I'll have to unpack that in our next
Well, the
interview.
middle arc is about that a little bit. So you'll see.
I love it.